Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are here. Hello, new friends. Welcome, old friends, and happy spring. We are the Construction Tech crew. I'm Shannon Pendleton. If you haven't met me yet, reach out in the chat and say hi. I'm zooming in from New Hope, PA, and I lead passive house projects at Sanderson Sustainable Design and Source 2050. I'm grateful to be here to share the work you're doing to make our buildings more excellent and efficient. So if you're in need of a little inspiration, you've come to the right place, because today's guest, Chris Hill, from Boss, from BCollective, and from many spaces where thought is smashing a glass ceiling, you're going to get every bit of inspiration you need. So I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Mark Willie and let him say hello.
Well, Shannon, this is another great Wednesday. I'm sure a lot of people were tuning in to the events of yesterday. I'm thrilled just watching the screen, seeing Zach Semke visiting and shaking hands with Kevin Brennan in New York. Like, you all feel like you're there when that happens because of all the connections we have. And then I'm watching all the mayhem, beautiful mayhem, behind Chris Hill. If you guys have any idea what he's up to today, give him a virtual high five throughout the day, because his day is so busy and we're blessed by starting it here. I got to tell you, everything he has to talk about is pretty boss. So over to you, Kevin Brennan.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Kevin Brennan from New York City, reporting live from the Engine 16 project. And we are actually doing on-site construction, a lot of debris on construction, a little more dirty. But what we're about to learn about is some off-site construction. And Chris is going to bring the technology, the technique, and a little bit of nerdiness. And he's trying to change the world with prefabricated panels. And I'm going to kick it off to my other co-host, I believe Sean. Sean's in the crowd, I hope.
I am. Good morning, everyone. I am Sean Sandamore from VP Operations with Clay Construction, and I'm on spring break down in California with my family. And so great that I can still pop in the world of Zoom, be anywhere in the world, and connect with all of you. So it's really exciting, because the gentleman that we have, not only is he the boss, he's going to talk about the boss. And there's a bit of background that I got to bring up so you get a full understanding of this amazing gentleman. So he is an accountant. He used to be a lumber broker, and then he dove into the passive house world, where him and his brother and the team built one of the first preschools in the Okanagan. So if you haven't been into the Okanagan, check it out, because there's a lot of great projects that he definitely touched. And then he was in Vancouver, and he pretty much touched most of all the first single family houses, either helping out with the air barrier strategy or just being around the key individuals. And then he decided to be heavily involved in Passive House Canada, still sits on the board, and now he created a company with two other amazing individuals called BCollective. And then he decided to, hey, I think prefab is part of the world that we should get involved into. And of course, with COVID and some lovely grants that the BC government put out, he definitely dove into creating one of the coolest open source systems out there. And he will share that with that. But before I turn over to him, one of the great lines that I steal from him all the time is that he counts seconds and pennies. And that's how we all should be looking at our business, is in that fine part of the world. And he is just great at it. So Chris, let's turn it over to you. I see that Jeff was showing some pictures from site. So I don't know if that's still continuing now that there's more people filling up the screens, but there's some prefab going on his sites, and he's going to talk about prefab. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Sean, Mark, Kevin, Shannon, everybody here. Appreciated. That's a warm welcome for sure. So very humbled to be here and get that kind of intro. I'd recommend you pinning Jeff on your screen just for fun. I'm going to do a screen share, but that is literally live. First Boss panels have showed up on our site. I didn't plan it this way; it just happened. So if you look at Jeff's thing, they're literally flying panels for our project for the first time right now, which is pretty cool to be happening right now. That's like 3 years in the making happening right now. I've also, just for context, I literally have a film crew happening right now as well. They're happen to be filming me today as well. So this is what my day is today. So let's have some fun. I got 1 hour with you, and I'm going to warn you, I got a lot of slides to get through. So we're going to have some fun. This is a lot of content. I think I'm going to set the record for the number of slides in House Accelerator. So thank you. I am Chris Hill, BCollective, and we're going to get going right. Let me get there we go. So truth is, I'm a recovering home builder. This business is tough, single families, and that's what it is. We put together a great business model. We thought we were building the American dream. We designed a whole whack of single family homes, passive house, paying attention to embodied carbon, all these things. And really this idea of this white picket fence idea. For us, the truth is the cracks started to appear. Under our lens, once you start to dig into the lens of what a B Corp is and really explore the ECGs, environmental social governance, that social impact and the impact you're making, you start to reconsider a few things. I remember the moment, and I'm going to show you the slide. Monty Paulson's pattern language course. It's a very good course. It's a master's class on top of what Passive House does. It's this slide that really started to make me rethink what we're doing, comparing concrete brutalist towers to urban sprawl, and which has caused more climate damage during the last half century. And these were providing affordable housing during a time of rapid economic change. So what is worse? What's a building, and what is the proper impact we should be making, and what is that impact for good? And it started to put holes into single family houses for us. It started to put holes in a lot of things we were doing. Passive house, I'm a strong believer in it, but you use the wrong materials, and is that the right impact? We do need to look at all those pieces. That really caused a reflect, rethink, and revise for us. So COVID, other things, get quiet with books, and you really start to dig in and what we're looking for there. So before we go too far in this 100-deck slide, I'm going to give you a bit of a roadmap. So I'm going to go through our business. I've kind of laid out a little bit about that lens, but I want to go through the challenges a little bit more, the criteria and outcomes that we're looking for, bit of state of prefab in BC, what I believe the opportunity is, and then a bit more into boss, history, product, and then looking at a couple of different production scenarios in the future. So I'm going to keep going because there's a lot of slides. It's not just crisis ahead, it's crises. We put that in, and I think we all know where this is going. One of the first ones off the top is labor shortages. The skilled labor factor is getting harder and harder to find. I'm going to give you some stats here. Construction workforce needs to increase by 7,500 skilled trades over the next 2 years. That's in the lower mainland alone. That's in our neck of the woods, in our market. At the same time, we're losing about 4,800 to retirement. Those are skilled 30-year experience, 30, 40-year experience guys that are gone. It is being replaced by 49 new workers, typically under 30. And those are like the new workers under the age of 30 entering the lower mainland market. So that loss, there's just that big loss of experience there. We're still short 7,300 workers every 2 years. And by 2029, it's forecasted at like nearly 17,500 short workers by that time. So if we're talking automation, we're talking offsite, this isn't about replacing people. This is filling a gap that we are about to see. The other thing that's very real in our neck of the woods is the affordable housing crisis. Our cost of housing is skyrocketing. Locally in Vancouver, this is actually a 9% decrease. 9% decrease, a single detached property, January 2023, the average sale of a house was $1.8 million. If you've been to Vancouver, you know the Vancouver special. It is now a luxury item. Has to be considered a luxury item. And in fact, in my opinion, all single family homes are now luxury items. 1.8 million. I don't know how you don't call that a luxury item and over the cost. Some context for BC, we've got a new housing minister. We definitely need to increase our housing supply. We are seeing funds and the ability to do that pouring in. That minister is also wanting to look at us as we're seeing massive increases in immigration, how that is tied to that funding. I dug into that a little further for this and looked at the net migration. That is essentially the new people coming into BC. And then we always see it clustered even in the Metro Vancouver area against housing starts. The dark blue line, how many people are coming in? Light blue line is the housing starts. We're a little blip during COVID in 2020, but this is a cumulative effect, and this gap is just growing and growing. Internationally, Canada has the lowest number of housing units per 1,000 residents of any G7 country. We're simply just not keeping up to what we need in that housing supply space. The big one, if you follow me at all, climate change. Climate change is definitely real. It's happening. It will affect all of us. The point I want to make here is it's going to affect the marginalized and poorest communities first. Those rich single-family luxury homes, they're not going to really get all that affected. There's a lot of people that are going to get dramatically affected fast. And that's that lens that we're looking at now. I'm going to blast through these because I think everyone's seen these next few slides a million times, but why the built environment? Reality is that buildings contribute. This is from our friends at Architecture 2030, what we're seeing in that annual global emissions from buildings. I'm a math guy, so I added that up. That's 4.6 gigatons per year that our industry puts out. I had to Google how many zeros are in a gigaton, and basically it's a crap load. Quickly, both embodied carbon and operational carbon matter. I think there's arguments. I don't know why there's an argument of these things that are fighting over which one's more important. The reality is that both are important, both need to be paid attention to, and it's critical. They are both contributing to this problem. So my thought is, okay, if we only had a crystal ball, we can look in the future and find some answers. The reality is in BC, and I think it's happening everywhere, is we've got some energy step code. The path is laid out. We know we have to reduce our energy. In the policy space, we're seeing embodied carbon come into play. We've also got Europe. This is a photo from Rangley. They're advanced in their offsite, in their waste control, and what they're building is significantly less in this carbon output space. So that's kind of laid out our challenges. What I want to talk to is our criteria. Criteria is sort of what we are defining as what we need in the industry. For me, I've sort of put 4 criteria as critical. I can't put something forward if the cost doesn't make sense. It's got to be cost competitive. We're competing against code-built homes that are the basic, like the worst possible houses possible. Time, it's got to happen quickly. It's got to happen fast. Time is directly related to money. I use the word resilient now instead of quality, but we have to have products that last. And I think that's the key piece. I'm not talking about shiny countertops. I'm talking about products that can stay and last a long time. And then obviously green. We need to be making these products sustainable. I joke, I use the word green because I couldn't fit sustainable on this slide, but I think it does sum it up pretty well. Well, I've got a microphone and an audience to speak to. Quick little rant. There's so much greenwashing in the industry right now. It is crazy. It is absolutely nuts. And I'm not talking about salad in the sink. The line I keep using with people is, if I punch in the face 10 times, but I reduce it to 8 or 9 times, am I doing any better? I think it's time we actually have to like really reduce those number of punches to the face of poor little Mother Nature. Right now, we've got tons of standards, outcomes, all these pieces are there. I'm not going to list them off. This is specific to what we're working in, but there's absolutely, the answers are already there. For me, what I'm looking at as we as practitioners need to ensure our buildings meet targets aligned with the Paris Accord and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not following Lloyd Alter, his post today is directly related to the building's outcome that we need to follow. If a question is raised about whether or not a standard or policy is a true climate solution, we just need to ask, does it achieve the required outcomes? What are required outcomes? Fun fact, of those sustainable goals, there's 17 of them. Buildings affect 16. The one that we don't affect is number 14, life below water. We affect all of the other 16, and we need to know them, understand them, and those are where we can get as a group. Climate change doesn't have borders, so we got to be following this, and all of our nations are coming in line with there. So in our practice, we've discovered there's some common outcomes, and some of these are really obvious, but there's all of these standards, all these pieces, there's sort of an outcome that we're commonly going after. Not going into metrics. If we know it's airtight, we know we need to ventilate, we know we need to put sweaters and get our walls nice and warm. That's going to then lead to good quality windows and doors and thermal bridge free. Those are kind of the basic principles that we see all the time. In our practice, I basically teach people how to draw like 3-year-olds in the form factor. It has such a massive effect on our buildings, on the cost, on the performance, on the speed at which I can build it. I can't tell you how important form factor is, and I'm going to repeat it like 3 times in this presentation. Within these outcomes, what the drivers of offsite construction and those goals are, they're the same thing. They're coming together. I'm purposely showing you a very simple factory. It doesn't have to be robots and all that complicated to get a high quality output out there. This is dense back cellulose and the wall boss system. Fun fact is that panel that I'm showing you there is probably flying through the sky right now. So on this, let's address the elephant in the room. Why am I an expert now in talking about this? This is the site that we're showing today. This was it about a month ago, covered in snow, massive amounts of delays. We were hoping to do this 6 months ago. This is today. This is what they're dealing with. We are flying panels. Truth of the matter is we are in our infancies. We are babies. We are learning. It's just getting going and just starting. We will be, we're growing and learning, but we have to understand the context of where we're at in our industry. It's highlighted really well in the State of Prefabrication by Craig. This is an excellent study on prefab. It goes into modular, it goes into mass timber, and it goes into the closed panel piece. We are very young in our industry. But there is a big piece of that future. The technology adoption lifecycle is a good look at this. You can compare where mass timber's at, commercial modulation, and what we're talking about is closed panels in that. We're probably technologically enthusiasts, is probably innovators, is probably a pretty accurate of where that sits, but where the future can be. We start to use the European panel industry as a yardstick, and then can look at where our Canadian 2020 National Building Code is and where we're expected to go for energy. Again, the policy. The reality is the expectations are already laid out. This is a massive, massive opportunity for the government, industry, and support this growing movement toward panel prefabrication. We're going to need to do it for a number of reasons, and to hit those high performance building targets. So, being the accountant I am, let's see what that opportunity is. I took the 2020 annual building stock from single detached to sort of the mid-MERB 50 unit size, took the buildings, square foot per unit, estimated the panel production. That'd be the square footage of wall, floors, and roofs, and multiplied it by a ratio that I commonly see. And that size of industry, if magically we had a button and every building changed to closed panel production, which is obviously not going to happen, but it would allow us to sort of see what the scale is. It's about 48 million square foot of panel. That blue little column that'll come up. For fun, let's multiply it by the average cost. That's 1.5 billion a year. Again, a crap load. Right now, our BC closed panel production with a number of great producers, I'm estimating at about 600 square foot per year for context. 205 houses, about 17 million per year. I think that existing has a potential about 1.5 million, 355 houses, 43 million. For simple math, moving this forward, I'm going to call it about 1 million because of the easiest numbers. And right now, at 1 million, that's 2% of the potential market. So this is just proving out that infancy. I want to look at the difference between supply and demand. I'm going to look at output and time. Our capacity goes up in steps. New factories, new line, new technology pieces. That's just the nature of capacity. That's how it's going to work on our graph. Demand in construction is a big old squiggly line. It is it just goes up and down. The problem, when demand is higher than capacity, market gets frustrated. They can't get the product they need when they want it. When the demand is below that capacity, the blunt side of it is manufacturers lose money. That's the way it's going to be. Right now, 1 million, we're at the start of this capacity growth piece. And that effect of that is amplified due to the state of where we're at in this market. Also, one of the things that I've discovered in this process is the current entry point is custom single family homes. The problem I have with that is the word custom, factory, repeatable, standardized. Custom doesn't give you that. It's all over the map. I see it day in, day out with the projects I'm working on. Clearly, I'm still recovering as a custom single family home builder. So what do? Kind of got to find your own way. Let's diverge from that path. We were fortunate enough to get a grant a couple years back and start into BOSS, Building Offsite Sustainable Systems. It's been a fun process. It's an acronym I didn't really think all the way through. We, to be honest, used to call it OBS, which was terrible. I think it was Jeff that's got the site camera on right now. I was like, why don't we call it BOSS? I'm like, that'll work. But so it's been fun playing with that. We're very fortunate to be funded from a number of places, some really key partners. They've that middle row. I mean, everyone on this page is excellent. That middle row really dug into an integrated design process over a full year, if not 2 years. We were meeting every 2 weeks to really dive in to all aspects of construction. And there's a huge path to get to our end goal. BOSS is a structural system for building homes that are affordable and carbon storing. An approach that is collaborative, open source, and aims to benefit the entire industry. Our goal is to be applicable to building types that are generally light wood frame, so 1 to 6 stories, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, all the way up to our MERBs, 6-story wood frame pieces in that piece. Quick history, our first application was a timber frame TGI kind of weird thing. Day one, it got scrapped and we started again because it is very expensive and cost prohibitive. And a overuse of materials is the truth. We then broke it up into a series of components and played within the components in our panel. And this worked well, but it became redundant and the install time became a problem. We did build a small art shack, also known as the fart shack, because Sean's here today. This is what's on some of the photos in that. That was our first prototype, which was 17 panels that had, each panel was different intentionally so that we can explore different connection types, different details in what we're doing in there. And we learned a lot from that process. We also developed 2 sample plans, not necessarily that they're going to get built, but we want to apply these into a theoretical process. So one was a duplex for City of Vancouver. The other was a townhouse. I'm showing 2 photos of the townhouse renderings showing the versatility of the cladding. Just by changing the outside, you've got a high-end project, or you've got what could be more of a rural affordable housing project with just a quick of the skins or the exterior changes. So where we're at today, this is a pull from our latest duplex. Very similar to what we're doing today is we've got more of a dynamic panel. We have floor cassettes, walls, gable ends. We're using trusses right now for the most part. They're just fast. They are prefabbed. We do have projects with roof panels, but the ridge beam starts to cause a little bit of headache. So we're more doing it. The software allows us to go more dynamic and we still get the output, but still trying to find that standardization in what we're doing as much as possible. For our wood science people, the specific wall panel, inside to outside, we're using 1.5 inch reclaimed lumber. Our friends at Heritage Lumber Unbuilders out in Cornell. So that is wood that is taken out of deconstructed buildings into the interior mechanical cavity. 1/2 inch plywood sheathing, that's tape for air and moisture barrier. We're using a wide format structural stud. This could be dimensional 2x8, 2x10, 2x6, whatever it is. Dimensional instability has led us to thermally broken stud, which I'll show you what that is. Could be the T-stud, could be in certain seismic zones, it could be an I-joist. We don't get away with I-joist in our seismic zone. So we've looked at other options, but there's no reason why that is a wide format stud, is really what we're looking there. Currently, we're filling our panels with dense packed cellulose. As I'll show you a little bit later, there's a variety of insulation that could be put in. We're using an LSL bottom and top plate, predominantly for the length of panels. It's hard to find a 2x10 in 25-foot length. So we're using that as a top and bottom plate. We've also found an interchangeable exterior sheathing layer. I spec wood fiber board. Awesome product, love it. It's really expensive and hard to get and supply chain difficult. Timber HP, can't wait for you guys to come on board. This will be a product of the future, but today on my products is 50% of the material cost. It just doesn't make sense for the value add. We've experimented with Rockwool Comfo Board 80. It actually works extremely well. It isn't carbon storing, but they have really done a great job in reducing their GWP, and their EPDs now coming out are really good. Still not negative, but getting way down there. We do use dense glass for a fire rating. It does work in our assembly. much higher GWP, but sometimes when you're up against those property lines, you need a fire rated wall. And to be honest, we've used a few projects with 1/2-inch plywood. We've examined the use occupancy load. We're building passive houses that are controlling the moisture. We've done a deep woofing analysis. It's right on the edge of what's allowable. But when you're building a, unfortunately, single family house for 2 people at 3,000 square feet, you know what? You can probably get away with that moisture load's pretty low. If we're going to put a whole whack more people into those houses, which we should be doing, that 1/2-inch plywood probably doesn't make sense. WB on the outside, specified by a qualified professional. And then we are putting rain screen straps on that. And we're looking at various different rain screen systems, but right now we're using a lot of pressure treated plywood strips. We take this back to that original criteria: cost, time, resilience, and what's green. What I'm going to look at is, okay, what are our outcomes in BOSS right now? Right now, this wall is carbon storing. So we're a negative 1.2 kgs per square foot. That's our LCA via beam, the Magwood tool. And what we're seeing, we're being requested to use in the city of Vancouver in our market. We are getting a negative score on those walls. That's massively offsetting the concrete we need to use, although we're trying not to, and other products. Airtight, I'm just using the passive house metrics that we aim for. We are moisture open through all of our woofy analysis and hydrothermal. Our R values in Vancouver, what we've aimed for is R40. Obviously, this is adjustable and flexible to what a project would need. We're getting quality out of our factory production. Time right now, that site that we're flying panels on right now will be a good tell, but we're expecting 5 days on site. And our cost, the big one that everybody wants to know. I put a range on this slide at 25 to 40 bucks a square foot. If you pin me down, I'd probably tell you it's about 32. I think for that project today, excuse me, we're at 32 bucks a square foot. That's everything design, everything installed, all your insulation panels, shipping, all those pieces. It's a bit like asking somebody, how much money is that bag of groceries? It's pretty tough to really get an answer on that. Quickly, our timeline: received grant in spring 2022, did a whack of research in the fall. First projects in construction went in January 2023, basically happening right now. We're doing a lot of work with industry partners to secure BOSS projects and future funding. And in 2024, we potentially look into developing a fabrication facility to support project capacity as this demand grows, and we can secure that up. Shannon, this slide's for you. BOSS is not owned by anyone. We're kind of anti-IP right now. I think it's a part of the problem in the industry. It's slowing progress down. And our idea is not to just make it open source, but go way beyond just sharing the content. Through collaboration, our goal is to have lots of suppliers to grow the capacity and confidence in that market. So I'm going to use a bit of an analogy here on horse racing. The developer, architect, consultant, general contractor, they need to pick a horse or the system early in the process, like months and months before the race. That horse may not be race ready. It may be getting old and tired when they got to pick it, or it might not even be born yet during the innovation and development process. You just don't have all those facts needed. In this system choice, the risk is increased if there's only one horse to choose from for that race. That horse has control of the race outcomes. When the race happens, how much it will cost to race, if they will even be ready to race. This happens when supply of a product or system is only viable through a single producer. Really critical in that specification phase. That risk in this innovation, in this change management, it's really critical. The idea with BOSS, let's get you lots of horses in the race. It's open source system, so you can specify it and can be produced by many people in the play. This keeps market costs in place. It does a whole bunch of key pieces. So it's intended to give those selectors more horses. The idea is anybody can build with BOSS. Doesn't have to use BCollective. It doesn't have to use any of the pieces of that. Anyone needs to be able to build with it. Yeah, it sounds cool, but how? I can't believe I just scratched my head at the same of that. That's like Pavlovian or something. So this is my complicated Venn diagram of what the industry and what we're kind of trying to set up. So I'm going to go through each one of these education projects, computer-aided modeling, manufacturing, distribution, M&D, it's not mom and dad, and then what production could look like in that space. All right, education. This is so critical. It's what we're doing right now. We're getting out. We want to educate as many people as possible. And it's a risk mitigation piece. We need more and more people to understand how to build with offsite, what the details are. It is more complicated. It is not easy, and we need to educate people. The risk of error is much higher in offsite than in stick frame. We can't pull out that sledgehammer and bang out a stud and put it in a new spot on an offsite project. The details need to be there. Early on, a big piece of that is education. Developers, designers, all those pieces, we need to educate them, the clients, the end users, and the people in doing all the installation. Projects. We need more projects. We need lots of projects. That's what we're focused on right now. I'm showing a weird slide of a girl balancing because it's about the balance of what type of project makes sense. Number one, for the early adoption of this. Number two, not custom homes. It needs to be those pieces. Our focus, where I think the truth in the power place, is missing middle. These duplex, multiplexes, townhouses to mid-rise. The form factor is already there. It's an innovative place that the users, and we can get there. This missing middle is just a sweet spot that we can go after. It also creates affordable options, smart density, build back Paris. It does all the outcomes and pieces that we're looking for. I'm going to say it again. I like this slide. Form factor. The projects that matter have the right form factor. Basically, I get a set of plans. I count the exterior corners. If it's in a double-digit space, I just say no, thank you, and move on. Redesign. The next phase is computer-aided modeling. This is pretty fun. This is a lot of tech. We've been enjoying it. Building out our app stack. Essentially, taking architectural level drawings. Nothing wrong with what they do, but every single one of them, I hate to say it, has an error. And we're taking it from a builder's perspective and building it in 3D stick by stick. I've showed a bunch of different pieces to this. It always comes up in the question phase. We're currently going Revit to most likely HSB CAD. HSB CAD's a light frame piece background. What the image I'm showing, the project we did CADWorks. So we're trying different options, and I think that's the truth. There's a lot of solutions there. One of the solutions, new startup, a little bit AI algorithmic based, is Cope. UK company. They're taking our early Revit models, and I mean like concept schematic phase, and we're able to dump it into their system and run various algorithms and workflows so that we can get very good data very early, to the point where I can basically get a complete material list, source it through dynamic product pricing, and get you what the material costs of that project would be within 3 clicks of a button. What that allows me to do is suggest changes, alters, that form factor piece, move this window there. This will reduce your headers here. So rather than just using gut feel in that early schematic phase of costing, we can get really high quality data in this, and also run a number of scenarios to optimize whatever we're looking to. Drywall, number of studs, exterior sheathing, glazing. We can run various scenarios and get real world data out of that, and massively cut down that early design schematic phase. If I push this into stick by stick 3D modeling, virtual design for construction, there's a huge cost to that. Once we've gone there, changing things costs money. This allows us to get really detailed really early. We still take the Cope output and run it to a 3D modeling software. Next is manufacturing distribution. And I'm not talking about the building of panels. I'm talking before that. We need an industry to support our production. As this industry grows, our current supply chains may or may not work the same way. Thermally broken stud. Love the T-stud. We're exploring some different ones. Our walls currently are thicker, and so we've been looking at an OSB web stock to thermally break it. It'd be a specifically designed product that is used for vertical orientation of that. I-joists are designed for a horizontal load. This is designed for a vertical load. So we've got our structural 2x4 at the bottom, and it ends up being a bit of a cladding attachment all the way up. That's what we've been working on in a number of places. It also provides dimensional stability and a whole bunch of good things. That thermal break being key. The other place of manufacturing distribution that can support this industry is insulation. We're currently using cellulose. Straw is pretty cool. Hemp is coming along. We're starting to use it, explore using it more and more. Mycelium, I think, is fascinating, and that wood fiber board. I dumped a whole bunch of pieces into these. These are carbon storing bio-based materials. Huge opportunity for our industry to take carbon out as a carbon sink, as a carbon storing place that I think we need to be on top of. And that that can support that production side of it. Distribution, simply put, with all of those regional fabricators and other producers, organizing that group for buying power and driving to better products is really critical. Manufacturing distribution can organize that so that they can cut out some of that supply chain in there and use that buying power, because you are now OEM in theory, original equipment manufacturer. Let's talk about regional fabrication. So I'm going to do two quick scenarios, 50,000, 150,000, and 500. This would be the square foot of panel produced, not the size of building, the square foot of output that they do, comparing to that 48 million number. Small facilities, 50,000 square foot output. On our ratios, it's about 13 homes per year, 1.6 million in revenue. Kind of operating in like a 5,000 to 10,000 square foot facility. They're really a framing table in a controlled space. Flipping panels can be a problem. Height, various like butterflies and equipment, butterfly tables and that don't come into play. Everything's by hand, low startup costs. If we look down here, they're about 1 million of the current market. It's about 5% of the size of the current market and 0.1 of the total potential. So this is still pretty small, but it's kind of, to be honest, a lot of the players in the industry right now are on this scale. Bump it up. 150 square foot production, you're going to start to have specialized equipment. That's a Wyman line. You're kind of looking in the 40 to 50 homes per year, 48 million in revenue. You're 15% of the current market, and you're still 0.3 of the total market. Butterfly tables, overhead bridges, material handling, top blown insulation. In my opinion, in BC right now, we got one or two in this range. Currently, both have potential to scale. I kind of did on this one. I mean, this is kind of what we're looking at setting up at some point when the demand makes sense. This is very high level math. I can already pick apart it. So this is not a pennies and seconds scenario. But we went and got a Wyman line quoted. It's going to use 2 to 3 people, and it's going to, according to them, output 50 houses a year. We got that financed. It's going to cost us about $400K a year in our equipment costs. We put some other costs into there. I went and rented some space. I got 2 management salaries in there. I'm going to look at my variable costs, material. I just used some ratios on what we're seeing and all of what we're doing. And then I put a bunch of labor in there, including design and all of that CAD/CAM modeling. Kind of just played around with some break evens. Right now, that $32 a square foot on a selling price is what I used. Pretty big assumption, but it's there. And what it kind of tells me is there is profit here, but you got to have it. You got to have that demand. You need to be running at 73% capacity to break even. So that means that I need, what was that math? About 40 homes a year. That's a pretty big number in the reality. So that demand up that capacity scale needs to be further along. So we need these projects. I also, for fun, quickly looked at the math on a 500 square foot production facility. This is like full automation, multiple lines, Ringley's homes. Paradigm Panels is probably the closest that we've got to that with their robots and what they are. BC Passivos is probably scratching on this as they start to optimize and get up there. You're kind of like in potential on single family homes, you're like 132 homes a year, 60 million in revenue. You're still 1% of that total market. You are now 50% of the existing market. So this is a capacity scale jump. That's a step. That's what's happening there. So I'm going to come back to that big picture. I went through education being the start of this. Lots of projects. We got to digitize those projects, set up an industry to support, and then we need lots of regional fabricators to keep up with the scale and keep going. This is a big exercise in change management. The industry is changing, and we know that's occurring. And so how are we going to deal with that? Change management at some point is this like blind risk. We're going to have to jump off a cliff at some point. So I'm leaving 4 closing points, 4 more slides. Green needs to be green. It's data and science. I don't take anybody's word for it anymore. Everybody tells me they're doing something green. I'm looking at, if you don't have an EPD, we're not even looking at it. And we're digging into the data and the science, and it has to make sense. Form factor. I don't even have to tell you what form factor is. It is so critical. It gets to be put on this last slide. The other thing is, the reality is whether or not we want to jump off this cliff, the change is coming. So we're going to have to figure it out. We have to change how our industry is operating to make this different. So we know it's coming. It's already in all the policy. It's there. The other biggest thing that I think is a key to success is collaboration. Is really sharing our data, is coming together, showing how we're going to make this change. It's really critical. We try to do it on our own in our own little silos. We're just not going to be successful. And the truth is our impact is going to be so small, it doesn't matter. I know every worm counts, but we need to come together as a full group and get that done. That's it. Thank you. There's a QR code there. You can connect with me, scan that. Links to a bunch of links that I'm sure I haven't checked the chat, but I see it buzzing.
Yeah. Great stuff, Chris. And I think sorry. No, I just
there's a new website, buildingoffsite.com, that is just in its infancy. We just secured it. I can't believe I was able to secure buildingoffsite.com. Kind of surprised me. But yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Well, my friend, beautiful slide deck. And it's interesting that, yeah, now that there's 3 people that own like the most slides, you, our good friend Ian Robertson, and good old Scott Kennedy. So Vancouver does represent when it shows up for these presentations, and boy, fast and furious. And if anyone caught me yawning, I wasn't yawning. I was the overwhelming information. My head was blowing and I needed some oxygen. Okay. So that's what was going on there. Okay, Kim, over to you to fire up the sponsors.
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Aero Aggregates, Brennan, Brooklyn Solar Works, Euroline Windows, Coltraco Ultrasonics Micro Air Leak Detector, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
Excellent. Thank you again, sponsors. Appreciate all the support. Wow. Okay, Chris, you told a story about Boss. Now it's time for some questions. Let's get into it. Before we do that, Shannon or Mark, do you have any comments before we turn over?
Are you kidding? You, right? Between this being my absolute favorite subject, number 1, and number 2, having Jeff have his screen live, showing live flying panels from the job site is like incredible. And then the takeaways, right? We've got single family is luxury, missing middle is the real need. Start with a simple form. Add a side of AI for dynamic pricing and real world data using COPE. Run it through a real world model and then find the sweet spot for your market and your business plan. And scale jump, people. We need to make it big. Chris, incredible presentation. Really loved it. Can't wait for the questions. What about you, Mark?
So, well, thankfully, half of my notes you read. So I'll get to the other halves, Shannon. So, Chris, over the last several years, all of us have enjoyed Tuesday, Wednesdays, and summits on Accelerator. And today was another Accelerator. Complete openness on what you've done with your team morning, noon, and night, right? What you've discovered isn't working, what you've discovered could work for other folks. Declaring the thickness that's needed, declaring the layers that are needed, and declaring all those materials and scales of the plant. It can only be said well by Monty a long time ago. We're not figuring out what to do. We're figuring out who's going to do it because we know what to do. You declared that. Your bag of groceries line, we all got it. It is a little known fact of your huge background in the lumber training and in the numbers as an accountant. So we could just put all that on the shelf and know that this has all been validated because this is how your machine, your incredible heart and head beat. So for folks that want to join your group and for folks that want to copy it, I say hammer down. There's nothing more real time than we've had right now. And thanks for being a part of the Wednesday. And Jeff, you win the award for Mr. On Scene. I've watched Jay, I've watched all the other faces. We love it. Back to you, Sean.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. Thanks, Jeff, for being the man on the site with flying panels. So good. Okay, first up is Dan. Dan had a couple of questions. Dan, you want to turn on your mic, or I will ask your questions for you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
for it.
can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so just two things real quick. One is the form factor. I mean, I understand it. It's very obvious. If you keep it simple, you're gonna save yourself a lot of headaches and a lot of cost. But I'm really fascinated by this idea that you could take, and this is I'm coming from a little bit more modular, more boxes. But if you take two boxes and you have one box, you put it on the ground. Now you take your next box, and instead of what's standard, and I get it, completely standard, is put it on top. What if you slid it off either this way or that way? And I know this is very complicated. I fully understand it. I've been there. I've had these discussions. But what you get is an outdoor space. On the ground floor, you get down here, you get a covered space. Yes, you need columns and foundations, and yes, it upsets the apple cart. Or you go the other way, you take it like this and you move it off this way. You have potentially a deck, an outdoor deck here, and a covered porch. So you're getting, with every box, you're getting twice as much space. Yes, it comes at a cost. It's a hassle. It's actually a pain in the neck. You can certainly not do it on single family, but if you did it on multifamily, where you then have to reconfigure, and I'm still talking boxes, but I'm fascinated by this idea that you could take what you have and make more out of it. With panelized, that's going to be a little bit different, and I get it, I understand it, but isn't there some small happy medium where we can get more? And I understand where you're coming from too, is that in fact, when you do these boxes, part of the reason I'm saying I want to do this, take the upper box and slide it out, is I want to use that floor more efficiently, and that roof, or the underside of the floor, whatever, of the box more efficiently. And what you said is that's inefficient. You mentioned that in passing, and therefore you're doing it this way. I'm just wondering, can't we create some outdoor spaces with this? I mean, does the form factor have to be such a driving force?
No, what I would say, I would roll it back to your outcomes. And so you're going to have a program. We as designers, builders, developers, clients have an expectation on our buildings and the outcomes. Two things that are going to come out of that is, and you've already laid it out, is even in modular or panelized, what we're seeing now is we can do all those things. In construction, you can do anything. It's just what's the cost and what's the impact. With that, by separating them, you're going to increase your external surface area. And what that's going to do is increase your cost, because you're now going to have to, that external wall, in my opinion, is the most expensive, the hardest to deal with, all those pieces. So you've now increased that volume, and you're going to have more thermal, in the thermal bridging space, your corners are your most difficult spot to deal with. So you're just increasing the complexity. Yes, it can all be done, but does the project, and each project has to be looked specifically, does it meet the outcomes of that project? I've got a project, I got an email this morning from a client that we're simplifying the design because they've got a budget of 1.2 million for a single family house. That's a ton of dough. Guess what? It's really hard to meet that in Vancouver right now. So we've taken back some of that push and pull in the form factor to a simplified box, and we're going to up the finishes, and we're going to up the design intent in other areas to get what we're going for under that particular program. If they had 1.8 million, all day long, I can play in that space and have more siding, have more corners, have all those things to deal with. So that would be my, like, that's my, like, it's all possible. It's just a matter of understanding it. And that's what we're seeing in that like, use technology. We've got like this AI that's happening right now, all these pieces. I can give you that material difference output in concept or schematic now that really gets a bit to drive that home. So rather than having a builder, and what I've done for the last 10 years is make good guesses on that, let's use data to actually answer that question once you start to look at those different options.
Great.
I have to jump in really quick because that is an amazing answer. Because you're looking at real-time data for pricing in schematic design from AI. And I think that's the first time this has been said on the accelerator, let alone construction tech, which is a big deal. Because I know from the design side, we're all speccing it in our own ways. And on the build side, we're all pricing it in our own ways. And this is that rote work that AI is meant for. And this is how we bet on all our horses at once, right? It's really beautiful, Chris. Thank you. And thanks for a great question.
Can I just follow up with the wood? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, the truth is our business is not necessarily, we're going to call ourselves construction managers, problem solvers. The truth is we're probably, the game that we're in and this entire audience is in data. The manipulation of data and getting it to the right people to do the right thing. From start to finish of a project, that's what it is. So let's use those resources that are there to the best of our ability. And knowing when to apply the data is key.
Great, beautiful. Just one quick follow-up on the wood, on how tall we can build. It used to be in the States that we were limited to 4 stories in wood, and that was it. End of story. You can do, that's Canada or that's the US?
Yep, BC.
BC,
I know my backyard. And somebody else on this call might be able to answer that better. BC right now, light wood frame, we can go 6 stories. And that's a pretty good, comfortable building and smart densification. What we're seeing past that, I think you need to look into where the mass timber comes into play. And below 6 stories, don't use mass timber. Even the mass timber guys say that. Inefficient use of material. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, mass timber is good from 6 to 12, if not higher.
Yeah.
It replaces concrete, doesn't replace beautiful studs. All right. I think Kyle had a quick question, and maybe you want to just, Kyle, do you want to hop on, or want me to just ask for it because it's a quick one? Kyle just wanted to know more about reclaimed lumber. Do you want to just give a little shout out to our good friend Adam at Unbuilders and what they do and how you guys use them?
Yeah, so we're fortunate. Again, I think this is a policy place. So we've got a leadership in our government, which is hard to say sometimes. We've got a lot of our projects, and we do it on most of our projects. In fact, all of this wood in my office is real, and it's reclaimed lumber. So this is lumber that when we deconstruct a house, most of our projects are infill projects. We are removing a pre-existing house. That material is saved as much as possible. It's donated. Our clients get a tax receipt, and we're starting to use it. So actually that house that Jeff is showing us is going to be used. They're getting the mechanical cavity is a waste product. It's a big pile that Adam at Heritage Lumber hasn't been able to get rid of. And we're also going to be using all reclaimed Douglas for flooring. So we're using it in multiple places to just sort of try to push that circular economy and use those materials. It's beautiful lumber. We're talking about 1920s Douglas for, like, it's tight grain like you've never seen before. So it's a great product. We're trying to use it more and more. It's difficult. The obvious one is structural, where we think we use a lot of wood. It, in theory, can be graded number 2 and better, go through a process and get there. The reality is, I don't know if it's the best, my opinion. It's a tough use for that product. It's 100 years old. There's probably better other places for that product in our structural space. It's just difficult to work with, especially in automation when we're looking for perfect products for machines and those sort of things. So in a factory place, it gets a bit more complicated. So that would be my opinion. I think there's a potential future for it, but it's got to run through quite a bit of processing. So that's where we're using it, and we're trying to use it as much as possible. Other secret, it's cheaper, and it's way better for our snow fences, our signs, all these sort of things. So there's a lot of wood that gets used in our projects that not necessarily structural.
And it's so beautiful. Don't you want to show it off? That structural gets covered up a lot.
Yeah.
Very
Exactly.
pretty. Very nice use.
Thanks for the answer, Chris, and thanks for a great presentation.
No problem.
So we got a minute left in this hour, so we're going to switch over to a few more questions. But if you do need to leave us to get back to work, back to I think Barbara, hopefully she'll go and have a nap because she's doing the early start. So Barbara, thanks for joining us from across the pond. It's tough out there, the new hours we have. So thank you for joining us. Again, we should just all unmute and give Chris a wonderful clap and thank you here because this has been.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers too. Absolutely. We forgot to even do that.
Cheers. It's water at noon, you know.
Thanks, Chris.
No, the amount of info and again, something that Shannon too, that again is what's great about all of these shows is just the new information you bring in. We haven't really talked about AI and the fact that you're using it. It's pretty impressive. So thank you for all that you brought up. And so Bob Warren's got a couple of questions. He's joining us from Winnipeg. His mic's not working. So his questions were, Bob had, is your panels shipped with finished material on them or is that done on site? And can these panels be integrated into a retrofit if we can convince an engineer, if we don't have to pull down the structure? So kind of two questions there. One about the cladding, one about retrofits.
Yeah, so right now we're not shipping finished materials, mostly baby steps. That infancy thing I talked about is the truth. We've thought about it, designed it. It adds interesting complications to seals and how you can tape things. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with David Ringley of Ringley Homes a couple weeks back and had a good conversation about what they do because they're shipping drywall and cladding on. They aim for about 80-90%. It's very doable, but you really got to take full control of the design process at that point. So not all cladding types work. You've really got to integrate it from the top to bottom, which I hope to do. When we set up, I'll be honest, if we're going to set up a fabrication facility, I think our closed panel line is like 1/5 of the factory. And you got to look at the house as a whole system. And so I'd love to have finishing, exterior cladding, metal bending, all those pieces as part of an integrated option that is sent out, and you're organizing everything that goes out. That is what's really critical. It's funny, I've been doing a lot of presentations for NRCan and a retrofit place in panelization. Retrofit Canada, Peter Armageddon is a great example. He is doing a panel that's arguably fairly similar that they're retrofitting on a bunch of projects in Edmonton right now. So I think there's a place for panelization in retrofits. I think, again, it matters on the project and what the outcomes are. And not over, our panels are structural. So if you've got a pre-existing structure, you're gonna alter your panel to meet a non-structural insulating load. So you just got to do it. But conceptually, would an open source retrofit panel for the broader market make a lot of sense? Yes. Would it use the existing panels that I've designed today? That wouldn't be the most efficient use of that material, in my opinion. But I think there's a place for it, if that makes sense. And I'd love to do it in a open source, integrated design process with a bunch of really smart people in the room, which I get to take credit for all those smart people, is the truth. So I think that's what I think there's a space for it. It's being done. And then where that goes from there.
So just talking about cladding, Barbara wanted to ask, what are your cladding products you're using on the latest projects, and what are you proposing?
So we've got that project 3156 is predominantly going to be James Hardy. It seems to be the norm in Vancouver in our market in the rainy season, and people wanting resiliency. We're exploring, the next project is stucco. We're going to try and go with some lime or even some cork stucco to try and knock back our embodied carbon numbers even further. We've got a thermally modified wood product that we're exploring that's pretty cool. It's got some high levels of resiliency to it on the next project past that. So to be honest, it's a pretty big range in there. And that's kind of the goal, right? You got to be flexible. And cladding is one that you can really change the look really quickly. And I think cladding's an interesting one that I'm a little softer in truth on my embodied carbon on cladding, because if you got to replace it every 5 years, it starts to not make sense. And so I look for stuff that's going to really last the test of time, because I don't want people screwing with those exterior walls. I want to build buildings. I don't care what happens to the inside. If you're going to renovate and make your kitchen updated every 10 years, so be it. But that exterior form needs to last 200 years. And so that's what we're trying to set up within our walls.
And then Shannon asked just quickly, is where are you guys finding your cork stucco?
To be determined.
Well, maybe
there's a couple different suppliers. This is a really, like, that's a little,
Let me guess, you're making that too.
yeah. This is an interesting, in this element of change and specifying new products.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to specify it. It's another thing to get it to your site, installed with the warranty in the time you need it, with a cost that makes sense. And this is the wood fiber. We ran into a problem. I love wood fiber, but it's just not there yet. And there is a whole bunch, and I think you're starting to see it. There is a bunch of good options in the stucco space, and we've got a couple of different suppliers that are looking into different pieces of it. So that's what we're looking at, and I've been fortunate to speak to a couple of startup incubator groups, and that's what we've been really digging into. Is like, you need your EPDs, and you need a level of that silly supply demand drawing I did. Is it you can do the same thing in a variety of markets, and in this exercise of change, there's so many of these startups that getting it to a construction site in a reliable way is can be really challenging.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk there, right? You're trying out a new material. It hasn't been in the field for 10 years. You can't often see it, touch it, feel it, know how it's going to age and patina. And then, is it going to arrive when you need it to arrive? Is it going to cost what it was supposed to cost? Yeah, big risks. But I love the conversation we had where we talked about maybe there are bonuses associated with taking those risks, so we can get these incubator products tested a little more quickly out there in the field, because if they're saving us carbon, saving us money, and they can make that delivery schedule, it's worth a try, right? Another horse in the market, another horse in the race.
Like, to the practitioners is your consultants are your best friends. I like Kevin's dancing.
Yeah.
Kevin, that was brilliant.
The reality is we need our I send crazy ideas to my envelope consultant and structural engineers, and we now use the same one over and over again.
Well, I remember the first time one of us used the really, really highly compressive strength structural foam under a steel column, and none of our structural engineers would do it. And then finally somebody did, and we were all like, send us that picture. We need to show that to our structural engineers and prove that someone else did it. You know, and now it's a fait accompli. We've got that. But that digital twin piece you talked about too is really big, Chris. Like, we're using it early in design for pricing, right? Dynamic pricing. And we're looking to integrate with the people who can do that best, so we can all get there faster. And what about using it after the project and like project closeout? Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I'm stealing thoughts right now. That was a really good presentation. Etro Construction, I forget her name right now, did a really good description, and the difference between VDC models, which are everything straight and perfect.
You have to explain VDC for people who don't know what that is.
Virtual design for construction.
Thank you.
New term that I think I can give Vancouver credit. I don't know if that might be going too far, but like the CAM process, computer-aided modeling, the models that we use before construction is VDC, and it's designed typically it's detailing out exactly what we need. It's much deeper than an IFC issued for construction drawings. We're talking every screw is thought out, every HVAC, it's all in there. The amount of error detection and clashes and problems we solve with that is worth its weight in gold. Digital twinning for post-use you start to need to get into like LiDAR scans and actual scans, because what you've drawn is straight, like concrete starts to boat, like things change in the built environment. And so if you're going to start to get further into there, there's actually a different, I believe there's a different piece. And so you get into big, huge data sets. There may be something that you thought in theory was good, but the plumber on site changed the location that made sense. And so it's very much used. The other, where I'm going to go with this is data again, is that digital twinning post-construction, man, the data that it gives you is so good. And I think we need to do a better job. Construction's a long, arduous process. And once we hand it over, we're all kind of done with it. But there needs to be a place where we monitor what our projects have done, what was actually built, what's the use, is the use, were the outcomes, the intended outcomes. All those pieces are a really big part of this industry that we're, yeah, it's a critical one. And is those, is that like the maintenance, the products going into it, all those pieces are really critical if we're gonna start to make these changes. We gotta monitor those outcomes is what I'm kind of getting at.
Well, and I love that you're just pushing the boundaries of what can these models do for us? If they can do this, can they do that? And those big questions are key to scale jumping, to getting us there. Sean, sorry to keep jumping in.
No. I'm just, again, sometimes you just got to be a participant in the show here because it's pretty exciting at where things go. So no, all good. We were pretty good on questions. There's been a few new ones that have come in. I mean, we took care of all of Bob's. I'll just scroll up here. We had Peter, good old PH Molnair had one. So you go ahead, Peter, as I gather up the last couple of questions that went through. And we got 5 minutes less than the final 15. Chris has got to get to site and actually see those panels flying in real life. So go ahead, Peter.
Good. The graph that you showed, hand-drawn sketch of the manufacturing and the demand for housing and the great influx, and then it wanes occasionally. How can demand be kept relatively constant so that the manufacturing panels can be having continuous revenue?
For me, it's projects. So in a blunt space, what I'm doing right now is signing lots of letters of intent and MOUs. We're pitching large-scale developers, institutional investment. We're starting to explore what the REITs are doing, the pension funds, those long-term investors in this space, market rentals, those sort of things. I think there's someone from BC Housing previously on here. The indigenous side of things in BC is a really critical one. So we're just busy lining up a lot of projects and in a space that they can be completed in a number of ways, but they have a potential to use offsite construction. And that gives confidence for, I mean, blunt side is myself or investors or the capital to come into the industry to put what's needed into production facilities, into manufacturing, into the design side of it. It is so important that we have that education, all those pieces. So I think it's coming. The change in conversation that I'm having with, and I'll say it, the developers, big developers, is very different than 2 or 3 years ago. They are seeing the writing on the wall. They're realizing their product they need to change, and how they change is there. So that's the fun part of this industry right now. And I think that's going to be the big changeover. Right now, that 600 square feet of the current industry enclosed panel, I would say 80 to 90% is going to custom single family homes, which is not, you're not going to get that demand that way. And there's a version of the demand that goes up that way, but it's difficult, it's painful and costly. And once you've got townhouses, multifamily, I've shown that presentation or a version of it to a developer, and their comment is, well, I can give you 1 million board feet a year right now. That changes the demand number. So once that, and if you, that squiggly line, the further you go down that as this industry grows, now you've got stable demand below that, and it's more of it. Does that make sense? Right now, that squiggly, the impact of that squiggly line is like 50% of the market. The impact when it's up here of that squiggly line is 10, 15% of the market. So but a bit of its time that needs to occur. We got to be patient because construction is tough. But we do, I truly believe it is just those educate, specify, and this is where that horse race, the more horses, the reducing the risk mitigation for somebody to say, let's use this system is so key. Because the risk load on a single source, if I was like trying to sell this and had a bunch of IP on it and it was only produced in my backyard, that's a high level of risk to spec it. It just doesn't work. But if it can be produced by a lot of people, a lot of systems, which we are fortunate in BC right now to have that. Number one, that's going to drive the cost down, the nature of it. And number two, it's going to give more confidence to the specifier in that space.
And the purchaser, your client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole process.
Brilliant.
So Chris, in envisioning things that are coming after panelization line, do you also foresee a prefab and modular partner being at that same site for continued deployment, or do you see that being a separate entity?
I mean, the meetings I had last week, it's not even the future, man. Let's talk about wet walls, bathrooms, using hybrid systems to get this done as fast as possible in that cost, time, resiliency, and green space. I was in a beautiful little factory last week that had no waste. The quality of the product output was better than what I've ever seen on site. They're doing a start to finish project. It is not in, I mean, they're the blunt side, they're park model homes. Everything leaves on wheels. And there's a big part of that industry that are 90% there. They just need a slight adaptation. They've got a framing table. They've got all the pieces and all the puzzles. They just have been pointing at a different place. They can easily expand and grow that. So I think there's a place as this advances to use wall panels to get to Dan's point earlier, a form factor that is still aesthetically pleasing, because stacking boxes on boxes gets pretty boring. But closed panels does give us quite a bit more flexibility. Asterisks, let's mind our P's and Q's of our outcome. And then use modular for kitchens, stairwells, bathrooms, our wet walls, our key areas that are the hardest parts of a construction. You can do those in a controlled environment, and we build up from there. Highlight reel, that's a big part of what Ringley's expansion into Germany is. And so if they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars there, it has a big potential. Like it's the future. Let's look at what they're already doing there. The next step is definitely modular, but I think we should be careful in modular that we don't define it as what fits on the back of a truck and use those basic building boxes. And that's why I think there's a hybrid space in there.
Your answer was exactly what I was hoping to hear. That nod out of the gate was it. And my reminder for the folks that see this later and the beautiful souls that are on here now, reach out to Chris and send this forward on your media groups. You might know one person, you might know 50 people, but the reason for Chris being on the accelerator is for you to pass that voice forward, connect those dots. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks everybody for hanging out.
Big day for the accelerator. So thanks everyone. Again, technology was delivered today by Chris Hill, and the boss, he is the boss. You're all the bosses. Let's keep building better homes. Thanks everyone.